Hi, welcome to Chapter 11. Chapter 11, we're going to get into what is called menu-driven programs. As we get into these GUI interfaces, graphical user interfaces, we need to give our user a way to move around within the screens, and the way we do that is we have menus at the top, and we see it in everything we do. Most applications, Outlook, the browsers we use usually have some type of a menu at the top so we can move around within that particular application. So that's basically what we're going to cover in today's chapter. So the menu-driven program gives a list of operations that it can perform on the screen and allows the user to select the operation that he or she wants the program to perform. So basically, for example, we could have just a command line driven application, because back in the day that's what we had to do. And so for example, it comes up and says add a name to the list, delete a name from the list, change a name from the list, print the names from the list, and you have to enter your selections. You type a 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then basically goes on from there. So this is really a pretty easy thing to do, because we're not going to really learn anything new, perhaps, but we're just going to basically learn how to apply what we've learned into this application. So we're going to use a decision structure. So we're going to use an if-else statement to basically figure out what is going on. So here is our program, basically the menu we want to display, that says we want to convert inches to centimeters, convert feet to meters, convert miles to kilometers. So we're going to give the user a choice. What do you want to do? Okay, and so we're just this is just a pseudocode. We're going to use a case structure, which we don't have access to in Raptor, but we could use an if-else statement. Okay, so let's just take a look at this very first program. Okay, so here's what we have. So we basically create a variable called menu selection. We've got inches, we've got centimeters, we've got feet, we got meters, we got miles, we got kilometers. So we got all those different variables basically set, and we've got them initialized to something. Then we're going to display on the screen, put on the screen 1, convert inches to centimeters, 2, convert feet to meters, 3, convert miles to kilometers. We're going to get that, and then we're going to basically just do a decision structure. If it's menu selection 1, we're going to go ahead and enter the number of inches, and we're going to do our calculation, and we're going to display it on the screen. If it's not 1, we're going to see if it's 2. If it's 2, we're going to basically say get the feet, do the conversion, and basically then display what feet to meters are. If it's not 1, 2, and it's 3, we do that for kilometers. If it's not any of those, we display on the screen that is an invalid input. Okay, so not too bad, pretty easy. I'm trying to minimize this so I can see this other screen. So I run it, and I basically want to do inches to centimeters, so I type in a 1, and it comes up, says enter the number of inches. We'll say 34, and click on it, and it says that is equal to 86.3600 centimeters. Now again, we could have done this. We could have, right before this particular item, we could have done a call and set precision to 2 decimal places so that we don't have to deal with all the different decimal places going on there. So again, I run it again, and we're going to convert, let's convert miles this time. So we'll do 3. So we'll do 60 miles, and that basically is equal to 96.54 kilometers. Okay. So again, we've learned nothing new at this point. What we're doing is displaying information on the screen to the user in order for them to basically go to a particular part of that program. Again, this is what the flow chart looks like. We just saw what it looks like in ours. Again, they're using a case structure. We're using an if-else statement. So here's 11.2. So let's take a look at 11.2. And it says, although the case structure is often the easiest and most straightforward, other approaches are taken as alternatives. For example, a series of nested if statements. Well, again, we've already done that because of, I don't think this is going to look any different for us. So let's take a look at, So 11.2, I didn't even do 11.2 because 11.2 and 11.1 are identical for us, because for them 11.1 is a case structure. We use the if else, well, same thing, if else for the 2. So okay, so we'll skip over 2. Yeah, because that's exactly what ours looks like right there. So it says we need to validate our menu selection. So any program that gives the user to get input, we need to make sure we validate that. Make sure that, because again, I've kind of said this tongue-in-cheek before, that the stupidest people on the face of the earth are users. The reason I say that is because when I expect them to type in numeric data, they type in non-numeric data. When I expect them to type in non-numeric data, they type in numeric data. So they're always doing what we don't want them to do, and we have to program for that. It says an alternative approach is to use an input validation loop. So we've used an input validation loop before. Do this until the user types in a valid input to continue on. So let's take a look at 11.3. So 11.3, we've got the same exact situation. We've got our menu selection, we've got our 6 variables, we've got our input, and then we basically get that input, and then we go into a loop. And we say, if the menu selection is equal 1, or its menu selection is equal to 2, or menu selection is equal to 3, we're going to go ahead and continue on. If they aren't, we're going to say that is an invalid selection, input the menu selection, and then we're going to get the menu selection again. Okay? So, and then we basically go through the same exact if else. Now notice that our if-else statement got shorter. And the reason it got shorter, because if it's a 1, we go into that. If it's a 2, we go into that. But if it's not a 1 or a 2, we can assume it's going to be a 3, because that's the only thing that's allowed into this if-else statement is a 1, 2, or 3. So I go ahead and run it. Again, I'll do a 2 this time. Type in 32. And it basically says that is equal to 9.76. Yeah, again, in these types of situations, I would always basically put in the set precision, just because we don't want that 4-digit stuff going on there. It's just a little easier for the user to see. Okay. So again, we just use a validation loop to make sure we get a 1, 2, or 3. Then we basically just go into our if-else statement at that point. Yeah, and again, they're using a case structure for theirs. So now we could modularize, break those different pieces and parts up into basically a procedure, as opposed to having it in one big program, which again is what we always want to do. We always want to break it up into smaller chunks. It makes it easier to work on when we have to do any type of maintenance. We may have again, this is kind of making it simplistic, but we may have a person who's an expert in converting inches to centimeters. We may have somebody who is an expert of updating feet into meters and miles into kilometers. So those folks work on those 3 separate pieces each, as opposed to having one big gigantic program. So let's take a look at 11.4. And so here's what we've done. We basically go in, and notice up here I've got my display menu, I've got my inches to centimeters, feet to meters, and miles to kilometers. So if I look at my display menu, I'm basically outputting the menu selection. So really all I'm doing, I'm calling that menu selection, and I'm getting back just what the user entered. My display So inches to centimeter, I am, inches to centimeter. Is that a procedure? Oh, it's just, wow. It's not returning anything. It's actually doing everything right within there. Okay, I see what they're doing now. Okay, so here's what we do. We display our menu selection. We then display the menu selection, we create our variable menu selection. Then we call that display menu selection, and it returns what the user typed in. And if it's a 1, we do we call it inches to centimeter. If it's 2, we call them feet to meters. If it's number 3, we call it miles to kilometers. Else we display an invalid input. So very simple. Run it. So I'm going to type in a 1. We type in the number of inches. So again, we're now at the display menu. So I'm going to type in 56. And we basically went into that. I've got it really going super fast. Let's slow that guy down. Let me go back here. I'm going to do one thing here. I'm going to call clear console. I'm going to go into each one of these guys and put a call to set precision. So let me slow it down a little bit, just so we can kind of watch it work. So it goes in. It called okay, now we're at the display menu. It creates all the variables, displays on the screen. Again, we can't really see the screen. But it would have said, okay, so 1 to convert inches, 2 to convert feet, 3 to convert to miles. So I type in 2 this time. Now it goes into 2 feet to meters. It calls that particular item. Basically 36, 35. Does the conversion, basically goes back. Okay. So pretty simple, not too bad, nothing we've not, okay, this is a pretty easy chapter to cover because we've done everything before. Now we're just kind of putting everything together to display a menu. Okay, again, they're using a case structure, so boom, real easy. Look at that. Look, it really simplifies the program. It really does. Instead of having this one big, huge conglomeration of stuff, we basically break it into smaller pieces. Notice how this main program really is readable now. We can really see what it's doing. Display the menu. We know what's going on. Inches to centimeters. We know what's going on there. And it basically has each one of these items separated out. We could use a loop to repeat the menu. So most menu-driven programs use a loop to repeatedly display the menu after a selected task is performed. So we want to keep displaying to the user, hey, here's the menu. What do you want to do next? And so let's take a look at 11.5. So 11.5 is we create our menu selection variable. We go into our loop where we display the menu and enter 1, 2, or 3, and else we put it invalid. Okay, so we're going to basically get a validation of that particular item. Why can't I scroll down? When we scroll down, we can see that we have our, I don't see where we're actually doing what they want us to do here. So let's take a look at theirs. Ah, I see. They're going back to, okay. Hold on. Okay, so I redid this program because it was not working right before. So here's basically how it works. Okay, I want to maximize the screen for a second. We've got a loop up here. Now this is basically a do while loop, or do until loop. So the very first thing we do is display the menu. So we want to do that right off the bat. If it's equal to a 4, we're just going to get out of the program. Okay. But if it's not equal to a 4, we're going to check to see if it's a 1, 2, or 3, and then we're going to basically put an invalid selection, and then it's going to come back around and display the menu again. Okay, so after every run, it allows us to basically stop, redisplay the menu, let the user do another calculation of another particular item. So that's really what's going on here. So let's run it, see what it looks like. Whoop, let me resize this so I can see that screen. So it runs. You know, I'm going to stop this for a sec. I'm going to put this clear console, I'm going to move that right here before we display the menu. That way there it doesn't have a menu on the screen. It'll look a little better for Raptor. So let's try that. So let's run it. So there we can see it's got the 4 choices. I'm going to put a number 2 in there. And so we get the number of feet. We'll say 76. Hit the enter key. It does a calculation. Comes back. Says that is equal. That doesn't work because now we can't see what it was. Yeah, that doesn't work. So now I hit number 4. Notice that it goes out. Boom, the program's done. Yeah, so we really can't do that there. I guess we'll have to live with it just doing it once. But you kind of get the gist. So really, all we did is in our display menu, we added one more item called end program. We return that back to the main. So if it comes back, so we can actually end the program off the bat. We could type in number 4 first thing, and it will actually never actually do anything. We could also put that loop inside of here that says only do these things if it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So we could actually do that as well. Okay. So here's our in the spotlight. In several chapter 10s in the spotlight sections, we stepped into, basically we're doing that coffee program where we want them to be able to do certain things. So here's what we want them to do. We want to have a menu that says add a record, search for a record, modify a record, delete a record, display all records, or end the program. Okay, so let's take a look at Raptor 6. This is going to be a very super complex program. So I'm going to clear the console right off the bat. So okay, so we got our menu selection. Here's our loop to basically do this until. So what are menu select? What are our menu selections? We have add a record, search for record, modify a record, delete a record, display all records, or end the program. So here we're going to basically do this until it's a number 6. When it's a number 6, we end the program. So if it's a menu 1, we call add a record, and that is going to basically take that program we did in number 10 where we add the record, where we have to then basically create a temp file, do them until we add one to it, and then we basically rename the file and delete the other one. We have modify a record, which remember does the same thing. It basically writes to a temp, does them side by side, modifies the one, writes it out, and then it renames that temp file as the other file. Delete a record does the same thing. Display all records just displays all the records. We've got a to upper. We've got our substring. If you remember, our substring program goes through and tries to find that because we have to search letter by letter. And then we got to rename. So these are all things we did in Chapter 10. We're now just doing them all together into one program, except now we're displaying a menu saying, what do you want to do? So we run this. Speed this up just a little bit. So here it is. We've got add a record, search for records. So let's add a record. So we're going to enter a description. Quantity. So it asks for it again. So let's display all the records to see what we got going on there. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so description, quantity, description, quantity, description. Okay, there's my Folgers Dark 34. Okay, so it looks like it all worked. Okay, cool. So yeah, I could go into each one of those and see how it works. You know, I'll have that program out there so you can take a look at it yourself. But it really, so let me type in number 6. The program's done. Okay. Now, kind of the bad thing about using the number 6 is the user really doesn't see anything happen. And so sometimes that freaks the user out, and the user's like, oh, what's going on? So what I like to do sometimes is when we do end our program, just do something like this, where I say, thank you for using our program, or thank you for using our coffee program, or display the logo or something. But just let them know that, hey, we're basically done here. So when I run this again, I type in a 6. It says thank you for using our program. So now I know I'm done. Okay, but the user before they hit number 6, it just stops, and they're like, you know, users expect something. They expect fireworks. They expect something. When they click something, something's going to happen. Okay, so that's why you always see whenever you leave a program, it'll say something like, are you sure you want to leave? Or, hey, thanks for coming back. Make sure you come back and do this. Boom, 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 boom. So they basically are saying, hey, I know you're leaving, but hey, see if you can, you know, I want to make sure you know that you're basically, the program's ending, and you're not just basically freaked out because something didn't happen. Okay, so Chapter 11, not really anything new per se. It's just a lot of taking what we've done in the previous chapters and put them into this one. So, okay, so we'll see you next chapter.